The following program was made possible by the generosity of those who have determined to hold fast to the true Roman Catholic religion, as expounded by the Roman Catholic Church before the disasters of Vatican II and the so-called New Mass.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Come, Holy Ghost, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and kindle in them the fire of thy love. Send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created, and thou shalt renew the face of the earth. Let us pray, O God, who didst instruct the hearts of thy faithful by the light of the Holy Ghost, grant us by that same Spirit to be truly wise, and ever to rejoice in its consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Hello and welcome to What Catholics Believe. I'm Thomas Nagley. I'm here with Father William Jenkins. He is a traditional Catholic priest. He is the superior of the Society of St. Pius V, and he also serves as the pastor of Immaculate Conception Church right here in Norwood, Ohio. Hello, Father. How are you tonight?
Very fine, Tom. Thank you. And yourself?
Just the same, Father.
It's good to see you.
You too. Father, I know you have lots of prayer requests to share with our viewers tonight. Would you like to read through those?
Yes, and some of these just come in just moments before the program. I should please pray for the repose of the soul of Alicia Latham. Alicia passed away, leaving a husband and multiple little children, so please pray for her and her family. They're suffering right now. And also pray for those who are ill. Pray for Kathy Field, who's undergoing some medical procedures, and also Eva Moole and Eileen Beskett. I understand Eileen is a young child and with pneumonia, but I understand she's doing better. But Eva had open heart surgery, so please keep her in your prayers. And also a little baby, yet unborn, but with spina bifida, very serious case of it. So please pray for that little one. Pray the baby is allowed to survive to be born and baptized. And please pray for Jim Condit, Dennis Chidi, who had eye surgery today. Also, Philip de Pauli. Philip de Pauli was very near death, as I was told when I first received the message. But it looks as though he's still with us, so please keep him in your prayers. And again, continue your prayers, please, for Angelo de Pippo, Andrew Early, two dear friends from New York, and also Cliff Hogan and Paul Riley and his family always, and also for Cheryl Johnson. Please pray for the victims of the North Carolina tornado or hurricanes. We have our own effort, a relief effort coming through What Catholics Believe and Immaculate Conception Church. And by the way, I thank those who've contributed. We have some dear viewers of the What Catholics Believe program who responded immediately and generously. And so one of our own graduates has come forward to want to spearhead the effort to acquire the materials. What we're told by people on the ground in North Carolina is that the money helps, but they have to take the money then and go try to find the supplies to buy, and they're kind of hard to come by right now. So they have to reach quite a distance to find the supplies they need. So this graduate is looking to acquire the supplies here and get them down to the people in North Carolina. And I understand that there are trucks of supplies that are arriving, and they are needed as soon as they arrive. They are just immediately needed. And much of the list of the supplies needed, much of that list contains items that you'd need for camping. That's how primitive things have gotten down there. Just survival items. So please continue your generosity. Thank you for the generosity you've shown already. And of course, pray for our January 6th prisoners, that God will, sustain them and give them their freedom very soon. Pray for our country. Our country is facing a monumental decision now, choosing in principle, essentially between slavery and liberty. There are those who recognize that it's not that clear-cut a choice, unfortunately. But still, it is a serious choice that is being made here. And also pray for the church militant. Ask God to have mercy on the church on earth, the souls here. We just have to look to heaven and ask, repeat as the church does, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. Lord have mercy on the souls here on earth who are still fighting for their soul's salvation and to be faithful to Christ our King. So there are many more intentions. For every intention I mentioned, there are 1,000 others, I think, that could be mentioned. God knows who they are. Our Blessed Mother is aware of every one of them. So if you pray for these individuals and pray for the intentions committed to us here at What Catholics Believe, pray for the intentions committed to the priest's prayers as we carry them to the altar. So you can also you pray for them at home. And our Lord will certainly be moved by that act of charity that you have. Remember, it is a spiritual work of mercy, the seventh spiritual work of mercy, to pray for the living and the dead. And so that's what we're asking you to do when we give you these names to pray for, to fulfill that seventh spiritual work of mercy.
Very good. We can do that. Well, thank you for that, Father. We did, before we get into some of our great viewer questions tonight, we did want to just direct our viewers to a program that we did recently with the choir director here at Immaculate Conception Church. We had I think was a very fascinating hour or so program with our choir director talking about sacred music, and we found that to be a very, very entertaining, very informative program. And I know some of our viewers have seen that already, but we would just encourage anyone who hasn't watched that to go and take the time to watch that, listen to it. As I say, very, very informative, very edifying.
Well, I'd ask Dr. Travis Yeager to make that program some time ago. And I'm glad to see that it actually happened.
Yeah.
I recommend it to everyone. We've gotten some very, very, very good reviews. People have contacted me, and probably you too, Tom, to tell me how edifying that was, how informative it was. And Dr. Yeager has a doctorate in sacred music, church music, and church organ, very knowledgeable. He gave an address to the Roman Catholic Forum some years ago. And there were some very good speakers at that forum, but his address was, I'd say, hands down the favorite.
Yeah.
That people have praised that, and that's why I was so anxious for him to do this. And I hope there's a part 2 and a part 3 as well. So we'd like our viewers, as you say, we're directing them to that interview with Dr. Yeager. And hopefully the response will be such that we can convince him to do a part 2 or even a part 3. Yeah. But we'd like to hear the feedback. So please let us know how you like that program.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, Father, we have some great viewer questions tonight on various topics. We had anything ranging from the questions about the poor souls, had questions about Adam and Eve, the Catholic charismatics, Catholic action, and some questions about voting as well. But to start, Father, we just we're about to enter the month of November, the month dedicated to the poor souls. We have All Souls Day this Saturday, I believe. So some of our viewers wanted to know, Father, just in preparation for this month devoted to the Holy Souls, what are some practical ways that we can aid the poor souls during this month of November?
Well, of course, the immediate thing that comes to mind is gaining the plenary indulgence on All Souls Day on November 2nd. That's Saturday coming up, the first Saturday of the month of November. On that great feast day of All Souls, Catholics have the opportunity to gain not just a plenary indulgence, but multiple plenary indulgences. That indulgence is called a totius quotius, which means as often as so many times. That is to say, that as often one fulfills the requirements necessary, they can gain a plenary indulgence each time. Each time they come to the church or a cemetery. Each time they come to the church or the cemetery, and they pray the 6 Our Fathers, and 6 Hail Marys, and 6 Glory Bees, which even children know. Even children know those prayers, the formula prayers that we learn from sacred scripture itself. They can gain a plenary indulgence. Now, there are certain conditions. It's not just a matter of coming into the church door and praying mentally 6 Our Fathers, 6 Hail Marys, and 6 Glory Bees. Because we're speaking of a plenary indulgence here, they would need to actually form the words with their lips. Okay, they don't have to say them out loud, but they would need to at least form the words with their lips of the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory be to the Father. And they would have to offer those prayers for the intentions of the true, the church itself and any true Catholic popes. The intentions of true Catholic popes are actually spelled out by the church. There are certain specific intentions that every true Catholic pope would have. And we say 2 of them at the end of the Low Mass, when we're praying our prayers after Mass. We talk about the conversion of sinners and the freedom and exaltation of our Holy Mother, the Church. Those are 2 of the intentions that are always attributed to true Roman Catholic popes. So if one prays for those intentions, that would be what is required for the plenary indulgence. And of course, the intention is to gain the plenary indulgence for a soul in purgatory. But the usual conditions for plenary indulgence also require that they have received absolution in the confessional, that they've gone to confession and been absolved in the confessional within the week, and that they have received our Lord worthily in Holy Communion during the week. Those are the usual conditions they specify. Also, one more thing, and that is for the plenary indulgence, one must have his mind made up to overcome his habits of venial sins. I mean, everyone has them. There are those who have a tendency to be kind of short-tempered, somewhat irritable, impatient. That's a habit of venial sin. If it's something that somebody indulges in fairly regularly, the person would have to recognize that and say, I have to overcome that. I have to stop that. I'm going to ask God for the grace, and I'm going to make the effort to stop doing that. Someone who's lazy, habitually lazy. Again, that would ordinarily be a venial sin. But he realizes that, yes, I have a tendency to be habitually lazy. He would have to have the intention to overcome that. If someone, let's say, has a habit of gossiping and being uncharitable in speech, ordinarily that would be a venial sin. You'd have to have the intention to overcome that and stop doing that. That's necessary also to gain the indulgence. So not just to overcome habits of mortal sin, but having already done that and being in the state of grace, you have to be in the state of grace to gain such an indulgence, obviously. Even more so, even more than that, to intend to overcome habits of venial sin, necessary to gain the plenary indulgence. So is it possible? Yes, of course. Is it easy? Yeah, for those who live in the state of grace habitually, relatively, it is easy for them to gain this. For those who have struggle being in the state of grace for any length of time, who have habits of mortal sin they fall into, it obviously requires more sacrifice from them. But sacrifice that is necessary in order for them to live in God's grace. It's all good. So even someone, let's say, who has habits of mortal sin and spends perhaps much of his life in the state of mortal sin, can be incentivized by the desire to gain these plenary indulgence for souls in purgatory. And it might be not only a blessing for the souls in purgatory, the greatest blessing could be the motivation of someone who needs that extra help, avoiding mortal sin, going to confession, being absolved, returning to the state of grace, and hopefully being able to gain those indulgences.
Very good. What other practical things could they do during the month of November, Father?
Well, they can go through the entire month. You know, the month of November is entirely devoted to the holy souls in purgatory. and they can offer sacrifices. They can daily offer sacrifices. We have the envelopes with the memorials. They can fill out the names of their loved ones. We place them on the altar, not just on All Souls Day, but throughout the entire month of November. And but if they carry through during the month of November, and praying for the holy souls, they can gain tremendous graces for the souls in purgatory. Remember, we can, by way of suffrage, offer sacrifices for the souls in purgatory to supply what they cannot do, and that is they cannot merit further for themselves. All they can do now is expiate for the damage that they've done here in this life. They have been absolved of all mortal sin before they died, but they've left behind damage to souls by bad example and so on that they're responsible for. And they take that responsibility into the next life. And so even though they've been forgiven mortal sins, they still have to answer for the damage that they've caused here. And this is what we call the temporal punishment due to sin, because it involves what they did in time, in this temporal world, the things they've broken, the things they've damaged. Especially we're talking about the souls of other people by their bad example. So this temporal punishment goes with them and can only be satisfied in purgatory. Or by the indulgences of the church gains for them in appealing to the merits of our Lord, our Blessed Mother, and the saints that are applied to their souls by way of indulgence from the church. So this is what people can gain for the souls in purgatory, especially during this month of November.
Mm-hmm. Wow, okay, that's a beautiful thought, thank you. All right, another topic. Father, are Catholics permitted to believe that Adam and Eve had physical parents?
No.
Really?
Adam and Eve were created directly by God. The Bible tells us that Adam's body was taken from the slime of the earth. Doesn't say anything about an ape, a pre-existing ape that God instilled a soul in, okay? This is what Christian evolutionists would like to hear, but it's not there. It's not in sacred scripture. God formed the body of Adam precisely for his soul. And it was a human body formed for a human soul. And the same Eve, we know, was taken from the body of Adam. It's in divine revelations. It's part of sacred scripture. It is a fact of faith, that Adam's body was taken directly from the slime of the earth and formed by God into a true human body, specifically tailored for the human soul. And God did draw Eve from the very body of Adam. And so he says, this is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And so Adam really is the father of the human race. Even Eve was taken from his own flesh.
Does the Novus Ordo Church teach anything differently, Father? I remember reading an article from, I believe they were citing John Paul II to the fact that he was attempting to reconcile faith and science and apparently maybe just implicitly supporting evolution. Have you heard anything like that? Does the Novus Ordo Church
Yes, I have,
different?
Tom. And, we default to the statement of Pope Pius XII, Humani Generis, 1950, about this whole idea of reconciling faith and science. But what has come out of the Vatican over the last 50, 60 years now has been very questionable, to say the least. Some of it, with Francis, has been not even questionable. It's just contrary to the faith, right? But you've noticed the softening up, the weakening of position, the doubt that has crept in through modernism, and the effort to juggle this and to try to finesse the doctrines of the faith and the statement of divine revelation in the Bible. The efforts to finesse this and to leave it implicitly open to other interpretations than simply accepted as a divinely revealed fact, faith. And so, yes, this is typical of the modernists of the New Order, to try to nuance this, as they like to say. In other words, to leave it open to, well, other interpretations,
Yeah.
which are not of the faith.
Okay. All right. Another question, Father. Could you possibly speak about the Cursillo movement and the Catholic Charismatic Renewal?
And by the way, you mentioned specifically John Paul II.
Hmm.
You know, there are those who think he was like the pinnacle of orthodoxy. He was not. If you go back and read his Wednesday audiences that he gave to people there, I mean, the things he was saying back there during those Wednesday audiences were actually abominable. They opened the door to all kinds of strange things. Even, well, I hesitate to even mention them here. But, I mean, there were actually things that he's written that were used in naturist colonies of, well, they sell them in their bookstore. And these are people who, you know, well, enough said there. Because they found it to be so provocative and, well, what should I say, suggestive. So this was not a good, I think. Now, John Paul II opened the door to a lot of evil things.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Tom. Go right ahead.
No, it's okay. What about this Catholic Charismatic Movement, Father? What do you think of this Catholic Charismatics?
It's not Catholic. No charismatic movement can really be Catholic. The charismatics were those who thought they could tap into the Spirit, and that the Spirit would just, you know, move through them and inspire them directly, and they would bring back the speaking in tongues. You know, this is very Protestant in its belief here. All they'd have to do really is read St. Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and see how he treats these matters of these charisms, and how he treats them with, I should say, not disdain, obviously, but he treats them very carefully and says they are not what really is of the faith. He says the greater gifts are faith, hope, and charity. These are the things that will actually save your souls. But as far as speaking in tongues and miraculous healings and interpretation of speeches and prophecies and all the rest, he actually presents those as those. They're nice and they're helpful to move people to conversion, but for people who have the faith, they are not the essential, certainly. They're not what makes the soul holy and pleasing to God. All of these charisms. But the charismatic movement is about these charisms and these extraordinary manifestations of the Spirit, you know. And unfortunately, they play right into human pride because they make them feel very important because, oh, I can prophesy. Oh, I can speak in tongues. And then they stand up and babble. And but what this often is doing is inviting occult spirits. It's inviting occult spirits. That's one of the signs of possession, is that you start speaking in a tongue you never learned, like ancient Etruscan. And so one has to be very careful with these things. They're rather dangerous because one does not have control over what spirit is going to be invoked there. And if that spirit is being invoked out of a sense of, well, a false faith, if it's being invoked out of pride because it makes me feel special, that could be a very evil spirit that answers that call, that summons, right? So the church has always looked upon these things with a great deal of, shall we say, skepticism, and warned her Catholic people not to get into that, dabbling into these charismatic things, these charisms. Can God send those charisms? He does at times. But he does, as he did with the apostles, to convert souls to believe that, in fact, this was the work of God. But for some individuals to say, well, we're going to go and get in touch with the Spirit, and we're going to start manifesting all of these charisms, special gifts. Well, that is very dangerous, and the church has always spoken against that. Now, Francis is very big on the charismatic side, Pentecostalist side, charismatic side. But this is because he is the quintessential modernist. The modernists say that the Spirit moves. That's how we experience God, who God is now. And this Spirit that is constantly moving through history is now moving through them and showing them a new way. And basically a new church, a new system of belief, the synodal way with its kind of anti-doctrine doctrines. And this is being attributed to what Francis calls the spirit of surprises. Okay? Again, I mean, in its history, the church would have regarded that as not only suspect, but as actually inviting false spirits and even occult spirits to come in and influence. Yeah. So when he has this synod on synodality, and he's trying to survey the common people to see who God is now, because that's who they're experiencing. And that's what faith is in terms of a modernist, what the people are experiencing of God. This is inviting actually occult forces and occult spirits to get in and do horrible damage to the faith, to the faithful, to the church. And I think there are quite a number of, those Novus Ordo cardinals and bishops who are realizing this now, and they're reacting against it because they realize now, having gone along with modernism for so many years, as Archbishop Vigano himself did, they get to a point where those who still have the faith realize this is going very badly. This is clearly contrary to the faith. And, it's amazing that they've gone as far as they have down this modernist road before they're beginning to realize, evidently, there's something wrong with it. But you would hope that later, if not sooner, they would all come to that realization that this is wrong and we cannot pursue this. And hopefully they would return to the practice of the traditional Catholic faith in its entirety and completely abandon and reject modernism. Yeah. Modernism is embodied by Francis right now, and it really is and leads to the occult. Ultimately, unfortunately, it will open the door to the Antichrist.
Wow. Okay. Another topic, Father. We heard from some individuals who are perhaps getting involved in some Catholic action groups in their area, and they wanted to know, Father, what advice would you offer to those who wish to begin pursuing Catholic action? And in particular, they asked us, must Catholic action always be under the direction of a priest, and must that priest always be under the direction of a bishop? Mm-hmm. Is that one of the requirements for Catholic action?
Well, Tom, I think one of the questions also involves the Cursillo, right?
Yes.
And the Cursillo was a 1950s, 60s answer to try to get the lay people involved, okay? And it was like basically centered around retreats and very emotionally getting the mostly men involved emotionally in the church and like forming a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. There were those who were concerned about the Cursillo movement because they feared it might have a kind of Protestant approach to faith, right? But there were those who welcomed it, actually, saying, well, it will take men who are kind of tepid in their faith, and it will help to make them fervent. And there were those who actually held out that hope. Even Bishop Mendez, at first, held out that hope. Cursillo, I mean, it's kind of Hispanic in origin, the little course. But Bishop Mendes soon found out that it was not going in the right direction. And so the hope and the expectation that he initially had when he heard about this effort of certain Catholic men to stir up the fervor of other Catholic men, he saw that this was not going well. It was not going right. You see, once you get emotionalism involved, emotions are not rational, but they're also wild insofar as they're not rational. They're not necessarily motivated by faith either. Once you get the emotions involved and you think, okay, what I'm feeling is God. That's God moving through me, my feelings. Well, there's no telling where that's going to go. Your feelings, God does not work through your feelings, right? The image of God in man is in your intelligence, and that has a matter of truth. And truth and your feelings are not always connected. So some people say, well, my feelings are my truth. That's the modern day idea. Whatever I'm feeling, that's my truth. Existentialism. And that's the way this can go. It can go in the direction of existentialism. It can go in the direction of Gnosticism, even, that I feel God within me. And so the Cursillo actually betrayed its promise. There's a work by an author, I think, Tatar, might be John Tatar, called To Deceive the Elect, I believe. And it was about the Cursillo movement and what it became. Now, those who got involved in it might well have had the best of intentions, but something went wrong. But this is not the first time there was an effort to stir up the faith of the common faithful and get them involved in Catholic action. The Sion movement, back in the time of Pope Pius X, St. Pius X, and the Action Française in the time of Pope Pius XI. These were efforts to try to get the Catholic men involved in the social arena because the church was under attack in the social arena and the church had to respond. The effort was to get the Catholic laymen of the church militant activated, strong in their faith, and to oppose the liberalism and the laicism that was being imposed on Catholic societies by the Masons, actually. But again, Charles Maurras, who was involved in the early work of trying to... He himself was not a practicing Catholic gentleman. Maybe he got involved because he saw the way society was going and he was concerned about it. But he came into prominence in the Catholic Action Movement, the early Catholic Action Movement of the Church, and he was leading it astray because he was not himself really a practicing Catholic. And this was the problem. The early Catholic Action movements would often be led astray by prominent laymen who had strong voices and would lead in the wrong direction. The Sion ultimately had to be condemned by the church because it charged off in the wrong direction. And the same with Action Française. It started well, and yet it kind of spun off in the wrong direction at times. So Catholic action really needed to be directed. Some of the priests who were leaders in this, you might say St. John Bosco was a great leader in Catholic action by raising the boys he did in his schools, and then also the girls too, because he had a prominent role also in with the sisters who formed the girls' schools as well. So this was Catholic action in its finest under St. John Bosco. And there were others also, but they had to be under the direction of the church. They couldn't just freelance and go charging off, because they soon would turn from knights into knights errant and be not only wasting their efforts, but even acting in a way that was counterproductive, misrepresenting the church. One of the most serious problems that they would encounter is the tendency to compromise. The tendency to think, well, we can gain more if we give away more and meet them halfway. That's always the human tendency. And traditionally, it was the clergy that would hold the line on that and say, no, there are certain things that are not negotiable. We can't, we have to keep that line there. We can't cross that line. But in Catholic action, all too often, the laymen, because of their lay activity in the world, would be more inclined to say, well, let's meet them halfway. If the Masons reach a handout to us, let's reach a handout to them. If they want to have a pancake breakfast with us, let's join in and have a pancake breakfast with them. So even the Knights of Columbus were winding up doing that. Okay? And obviously, this is impossible. You can't mix these two things. They're antithetical to each other. And what we find now is, even among our traditional Catholics, they get involved in these pro-life efforts. They meet Novus Ordo Catholics who are conservative, and the traditional Catholics begin to compromise and begin to not only associate with the Novus Ordo Catholics, but instead of bringing them into tradition, they actually wind up opening up their minds and hearts to modernism and looking for any vestiges of the Catholic faith, the traditional Catholic faith, in the modernist clergy, in the modernist churches, and so on. And so they begin compromising. In other words, the tendency is to try to meet them halfway. What is halfway between Catholicism and modernism?
Modernism?
Modernism. It's still modernism. St. Pius X says modernism is the synthesis of all heresies. Where is the midway point between Catholicism and modernism? There is no midway point. And so, you know, as you say, if they compromise, immediately they adopt the policies and the principles of modernism to do it. Just to try to compromise with them, they have to adopt certain policies and principles of modernism. And yes, they become modernists. Oh, they may still go to the Latin Mass and so on, but they begin thinking like modernists. They have to, in order to make that first compromise. So it's deadly. That's why it's important. It always was important to the Church that the laity who are involved in Catholic action be under the direction of a good, solid Catholic priest. He's a very good, solid theologian, and not given to compromise. Okay, because there were even priests involved who were ready to compromise and give way on things, right? But nowadays, in particular, it's important that the laity be involved with a good Catholic, traditional Catholic priest who is not willing to compromise with modernism, not even in any way, not even for a second, and who has to hold that line. Because the tendency is very, very powerful to want to compromise, thinking that you're gaining something when you're actually losing more than you're gaining.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's interesting, Father. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, okay, Father, we had maybe a couple more topical, current event type things. You know, we have the elections coming up here in just a matter of days, and we spent some time talking about that on the program. But we had a viewer write in with an objection to voting, and I wanted to just read his email here straight from the inbox. He says, the argument is not objecting to voting because one single positive thing to vote for can't be found. In fact, at least one positive thing can always be found to vote for, and that's exactly the point. He says, I, and I assume a lot of others, object to voting because we object to the process itself, giving limited, contrived options that act as a dialectic that is constantly shifting one direction as a whole. There will always be an ever-receding amount of bones thrown to the dog to get it to come along. The point of the whole thing is to break the mind and spirit of the voter by getting him to consent to lies and his own destruction. To put it another way, what Father Jenkins said about Francis's dialectic, his synodal dialectic at the end of the show this past week should just be applied to matters of state. Francis says and does Catholic things in order to confuse and manufacture consent for his process. The goal is menticide. How would you respond to that email, Father? There's a lot there, but
I find it a little confusing,
Yeah.
some of the expressions that are used there. She replies to matters of states, and matters of state, and I wonder what, I don't get his point in that, okay. But I think I do get the point. And what I think he's expressing here is true. You know, I agree with much of what he says there, to the extent that I understand the point he's making, is that there is a problem with even getting involved in the voting process when much of what we're voting for doesn't represent our faith, right? We're looking for something to vote for. He says there will always be something that you can justify voting for. But in the process, what are you giving away? Like what I was just saying. What are you surrendering? What are you compromising on? I think that's basically his point. And I think his point is that if you do that, if you take part in this process, you're giving away more and more. And you're giving away your mind, eventually, to kind of accept the process as normal, standard operating procedure. And I guess when he says menticide, I guess that's what he means by that. So what I think he's expressing, actually, is that the voting process we have is really a dilemma. I mean, people are on the horns of a dilemma, right? And I see that. I see when we're asked to vote or challenged to vote on something, like the current vote. I mean, you have bad, worse, and worst. You don't have good, better, and best. You have bad, worse, and worst in terms of the party platforms, in terms of the individual politicians and what they say they're standing for. So, you know, once you get into that routine of mindset of okay, how much bad can I tolerate, and what is worse than this that would necessitate my voting for this bad because the alternative is so much worse. And this is standard operating procedure. This is all we've got to go on right now. He says, I mean, you can always find something positive to vote for. I understand that. But if you're talking about a dilemma, then that means that you're caught between two evil things. Take, for example, somebody kidnaps one of your loved ones and is holding them for ransom, and they want you to pay $1 million ransom. You have a dilemma. That is putting you on the horns of a dilemma, as they say. Your loved one is in their hands, and you realize that now you have to pay $1 million and hope that your loved one will be freed, or to refuse to pay the $1 million and leave your loved ones to the mercy of the unmerciful captives who've kidnapped them. Right? Neither one of those options is good. You could pay the money, and they could still kill your loved one, and you would never see them again. You could pay the money, and they return your loved one, but the fact that you paid the money emboldens them to say, well, this is a good thing, a good way to get money, so we should just continue. And others begin to imitate them and say, hey, this is good business. Let's start kidnapping. There are areas of the world now where this is almost like a common plague right now. Like the cartels and all the rest in Mexico and so on. It's big business, you know. So you see what I mean? It's a dilemma. No matter which way you go, it's a problem. I look upon the voting situation in this country and really around the world right now as though we are actually on the horns of a dilemma, and we are kind of hostages to this situation. I would say, okay, I understand that yes, one can get into this pattern of voting this way to the point where one begins to accept it and undergoes menticide. But I don't think that's necessary. I think one can always bear in mind, I'm a hostage here. I'm not going to have, what is the syndrome where the hostage begins to sympathize with his captors?
Stockholm syndrome?
Stockholm syndrome. We don't have to do that. Some do, but I think he's describing menticide sort of in that way. We can always remember that this is a very bad situation. We have to overcome this, and we have to stop this. At the same time, realizing, nonetheless, the only way I'm going to be able to do anything to stop it is by still, in this case, having the right to condemn it and to speak against it. And I have to vote for that. I have to maintain that right of mine to speak out and to condemn evil. And I think that's what's at stake right here. If there's anything that distinguishes the one party from the other, the one party absolutely is determined to squelch free speech of any kind that would challenge their policy. And the other party claims to be, at least at this point, standing up for freedom of speech, that you can object even to their policies and condemn them and work against them and try to convince people that they are wrong and to put an end to abortion and so on, with the right to do that. It's interesting to watch the one party. I don't care whether they're liberals, Democrats, progressivists, whatever they want to call themselves. They have the nerve to call the members of the other party Nazis and fascists, right? And I mean, this is the party that is actually raiding people's homes, bashing their doors down in the middle of the night, throwing flash grenades into their living rooms, even maiming their children, dragging their parents out in handcuffs, in their pajamas, carting them away by SWAT teams, throwing them in prison. This is what they're actually doing to people, right? They're jailing 90-year-old so-called pro-life activist ladies. They're jailing young mothers simply for protesting abortion. This is the party that is doing this. And they're claiming their opponents are fascists and Nazis. This is the party that is actually aborting and in favor of abortion up until death, and even killing children who survive abortion and killing them right, in the abortuaries. This is the party that celebrates this, that applauds itself for voting these things into law. And they have the nerve to claim their opponents are fascists and Nazis, right? But this is who they are. You can always tell what the fascists, what the Nazis, what the socialists, what the liberals, the leftists, the progressives, the Democrats are doing, because it's exactly what they're accusing their opponents of doing. That's exactly what they are in the process of doing, not just planning to do. It's what they are actually doing at the moment. Whatever they're accusing their opponents of doing, they are doing, guaranteed. And the best defense is a good offense. And they're always on the offensive, and they are always offensive. You know, they accuse their opponents of hate. They accuse the opponents of abusing them, and so on and so forth. And yet they are the ones who are filled with hatred and violence, always talking and always committing the acts of violence. This is the way they are. This is who they are. They can't help it, except by grace changing their hearts. But anyway, so Tom, you know, we have to maintain our right to oppose this. And I think that this is definitely something worth voting for. Are we on the horns of a dilemma? Yes, I admit that. But I can vote for that thing without succumbing to menticide and just accepting this as right and normal and good. I realize the process can be very bad, like the process of giving into modernism and going along with modernism. Yeah, compromising with that is wrong. I don't look upon that as compromise. If I'm voting for my right to oppose evil, I have no intention of compromising. The one caveat I would have is, it seems to me that those who are ready to simply not vote and to be passive in this determined effort to stifle their voice and take away whatever civil right they have to speak and to oppose evil in our society. And that's, I think, what the Democrats represent, precisely that. That those who are willing to be passive and let them take greater control and to absolutely criminalize free speech against abortion, infanticide, and killing, euthanasia, and all the rest. I wonder, are these the people who really were working hard and using their rights to oppose evil? Or were they the ones who were just giving lip service to it and saying, well, I'm pro-life, but didn't really do anything? I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the individual who wrote this. He might be a champion in social doctrine of the Catholic Church and be fighting tooth and nail with all of his time, talent, resources, energy against the evils besetting society. He might be that way, for all I know. But I'm just wondering if those who are so ready now in this election to let the Democrats seize complete control and to stifle and shut down any possible opposition to the evils that they're doing, if they're the type of people who haven't really gotten off their couch to really fight the battle. Whereas those who are fighting the battle and who are out there in the streets and doing what they can, resisting in every way they can, they're the ones who see the necessity of maintaining their right to be active against the evil. And therefore they see, no, we have to vote, and we have to vote for our right to be able to speak up and to resist the evil. My instincts, for what it's worth, tell me that those who are saying, well, I'm not going to vote because I'm just stepping out of the whole process. There are some, I think, yes, who have had leadership in the pro-life areas and so on. But I wonder how many of them actually have been very passive about this and basically just are perfectly happy with surrendering with whatever remaining rights they have that are recognized to oppose the evil, because they just haven't been really opposing the evil as they should have been. I just wonder about that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
for what it's worth.
Yeah.
The election is going on already. You have the early balloting. We're already hearing these horror stories, massive vote dumps, ballot dumps coming out of nowhere, right? Thousands and thousands of ballots that are just kind of arriving on the scene and just dumped there, right? Now, in past elections, they've not been questioned. Now they're being questioned. Thank goodness, okay? So, again, I mean, we have to be concerned with our country being stolen from us, right? By false balloting here. If we simply withdraw from voting, are we not already surrendering the country to the control of these people? And I think it amounts to that. I think it's wrong to do that. Having said all that, by the way, I mean, I think the gentleman or lady, whoever writes it, has a point. It's not that I'm saying, there's no value in what they're saying, that I agree with nothing that they wrote. I actually agree with the point that he's making here. But we can disagree on the conclusion as to, well, what is the right thing to do about this? And we can do so very honestly. I mean, this individual who wrote that could say, well, therefore, I'm stepping out of the process because I think that is the right thing to do. And I might say, well, I don't agree with you, but I'm certainly not going to accuse you of being a bad person for coming to that conclusion. I can see why you would come to that conclusion and might think that that is the right thing to do. I can understand the process and your thinking process on that. I don't agree under the circumstances, but even though I might say I disagree, I can't say that I think this person is a bad person for doing that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So we have to be careful not to let disagreements about the practical conclusions turn us against each other. What we need to do is we need to have this communication and work things through and have serious discussions about this. Try to come to a unified consensus, or a unified, let's say, sense of action, by anathematizing each other, we're not going to help matters. So I'd like to think that whoever wrote that would also say essentially the same thing. That, well, I can understand why people would feel compelled to vote under these circumstances, because they feel that, yes, we still need to maintain that right to, that civil right to stand up and to oppose this evil. And I can see that. But they might say that that is ultimately not going to work and that's not the best way to proceed. They have a right to decide that.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
There you go. Well, Father, one of our viewers wanted to know if you have had a chance to read through Francis's latest encyclical on the Sacred Heart, and if you had any comments on that.
I haven't read through it. I've been intending to, but I've just been kept very occupied. But I have been reading some comments about it. The comments are made by people whose judgment I trust in these matters. And I've also read parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing. But I think the commentary that I've read is accurate based upon the parts of the document I've actually read. And that is, number one, Francis is using this as an opportunity to portray himself as a devout Catholic devoted to the Sacred Heart. Okay? Traditional Catholic devotion, and Francis is now clothing himself in that. Why? Because every now and then he has to somehow put on some kind of Catholic display. Okay? So he invokes the Sacred Heart in this case. But what I understand he's doing, if one reads the document, I'm going to go and check this out, is that he's tying his program, his agenda of synodality, to the Sacred Heart, as though the Sacred Heart somehow opens the door to his concept of church and loving acceptance and, synodality, ultimately. That he's bringing in all of his basic comments of like climate change and being concerned for the downtrodden immigrants and so on and so forth. All of these agendas that he's working on somehow find their place in this encyclical and somehow get woven into the narrative about the Sacred Heart. It makes perfect sense that he would attempt this to try to insinuate his policies in a traditional Catholic guise for the sake of deceiving the elect, really, and of getting those who still have the faith and are still devout thinking in these terms, making some kind of connection, however unwarranted, but making some kind of connection between climate change and the Sacred Heart, between mass immigration and embracing all these Muslims, like Lockland, the town 10 minutes away from here, 3,500 population, I'm sure mostly Christian in some way or another. Now, 3,000 Muslims from Mauritania have come through communist Nicaragua and found their way all to Lake Lockland, Ohio. They're all being directed here by social media. Who's behind this? And the town is completely overrun, and they don't know what to do with this. This infusion, of people who don't even speak English, Muslims, and living as they do with their customs and so on, and making demands now completely, shall we say, overwhelming the social structure of that little town. It's criminal to do this to them, those who are sending them there, because it's criminal to do this to people who are living in Lockland, but it's criminal to do this to 3,000 people from Mauritania also, who just are basically dumped there and, left to fend for themselves, more or less, right? That's not, you don't treat people like that. But that's what the globalists will do. Without any hesitation, they'll use people to serve their own purposes. And, but, to try to couch us in the idea of Christ's love, we have to open up our doors to receive all these people and so on. And this is your obligation. And then to inflict this on people who are just trying to make a living and get through day by day and have that tremendous burden thrust upon them, as though it's all they're doing. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not just to them. And then this is all claimed now in the name of the Sacred Heart. You have to do this. So I'm invoking now the Sacred Heart to say, you have to do this now. So how can you turn down the Sacred Heart? Basically. I think it's a big a ploy on the part of Francis the Modernist to try to cloak himself in the guise of a sheep. But I believe that inwardly he is a ravenous wolf. And I think the ultimate objective is to deceive the elect and to pursue the globalist policies, which will de-Christianize the world and ultimately pave the way for the Antichrist. So, anyway, tune in next week. By that time, both of us will have read the encyclical and we'll have more to say about it.
Sounds good.
And with more information.
Okay. Well, Father, thanks for everything tonight. Thanks for being here.
Certainly. There's a man named Anthony Stein. He has a web channel called Return to Tradition, right? He's actually referred to us recently, our program, or myself anyway. And he's pretty relentless in his dealing with what's going on in the Vatican right now, what the modernists are up to. And he has a review of this encyclical on the Sacred Heart, which is hard-hitting and probably very revealing. So in the meantime, one could access that and see what he has to say.
Okay. Father, thank you. God bless you.
Tom, God bless you too, and God bless our viewers too.
That's right. Thanks to all of our viewers for watching this episode of What Catholics Believe. Until next time, we ask that you all remember the words of Our Lady at Fatima, to consecrate yourselves and your families to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and to pray and do penance. Thank you, and God bless you.